Now, when an RAF Chinook helicopter crashed into the Mull of Kintyre, it claimed the lives of the 29 people on board. More than 30 years on, the families of those victims are still fighting for answers.
Although the Prime Minister has already rejected calls for a public inquiry, the bereaved families are promising to carry on their fight, as Alex Dunlop reports.
On a trip from Northern Ireland to Scotland in 1994, disaster struck.
Good evening. An RAF Chinook helicopter with 29 people on board has crashed in the west of Scotland.
It was one of the RAF's worst peacetime losses of life. All 29 people on board died, including Major Chris Doherty from Wisbech. He was one of several intelligence officers on the flight.
He was a very talented, gregarious, warm person, an infectious smile. It enabled him to be a very well-liked but professional army officer.
3 decades on, his sister Nicola, who lives in Norfolk, wants a full public inquiry. Last year, a BBC documentary highlighted concerns over the Chinook's airworthiness. It also revealed that documents relating to the incident won't be released by the Ministry of Defence until 2094, 100 years after the crash.
There is something to hide. There must be. Why else would you do it?
What do you think they are hiding?
Who gave the order to allow 29 people to go onto an unairworthy aircraft? That is the question I would like asked. Why did my brother, along with 28 others, board an aircraft that highly trained MOD test pilots were ordered not to fly?
The cause of the crash is still unknown. The MOD says the accident has already been the subject of 6 inquiries and that sealed records cannot be released due to data protection issues. In a letter to the families, the Prime Minister says he does not believe that a new inquiry can bring any greater certainty or is in the public interest. Jonathan Tapper from Norfolk was one of 2 pilots flying the Chinook. Initially, the crash was blamed on pilot error, but MOD documents passed to the BBC, one written 9 months before the crash, detailed serious concerns about the helicopter's computer software, describing it as positively dangerous. A long campaign by Jonathan's late father, Mike Tapper, led to an independent review which exonerated both pilots in 2011. Nicola and the other families have now launched a petition and hope to gather 100,000 signatures. They want a judicial review and they say their day in court. Why are you so determined to carry on?
Because we're looking for truth, transparency and justice. We need the answers.
And that, says Nicola, is the least she can do for her brother and his comrades. Alex Dunlop, BBC News.
Let's talk more about this now. We're joined on the sofa by Esme Sparks and Patricia Conroy, both from the Chinook Justice Campaign. Both of you lost your dads in that terrible incident. You were just saying you have this bond, this terrible bond, as a result of what happened that night. Esme, do you want to just, what do you remember? How old were you at the time?
So I was just 7 years old when I lost my father. My younger brother and sister were 2. We had only relocated to Northern Ireland 6 months prior to the crash taking place. And that particular night, I just remember there was a knock on the door, and it was a colleague of my father's and his partner who were dressed up as if they had been at a party or were coming from a party, and they just said, is your mummy in? And I remember in that moment, I just had this sinking feeling. I just knew something terrible had happened. Nobody comes and knocks on the door in the evening and asks that, while your father's away. So yes, really, really traumatic.
And you've lived with the consequences of that trauma all your life since?
Yes, absolutely, and that's been huge. Growing up without a father figure, but also not having the answers as to why my father died when he did is huge, because of course grief is always incredibly difficult. But if you don't have answers as to how that person was taken from you, that makes it even harder to deal with.
Patricia, you were 22 at the time, so a different understanding of what would have happened, but just explain how that's impacted on your life in the years since.
We often say as a family, we feel one of the luckier families. I had a childhood with Dad. We knew him, we loved him, we grew up with him. That Esme, had a very short time. But it was devastating. He was just ripped from the centre of our family. He was such a family man. We loved him, looked up to him. He was so hardworking, conscientious, and yeah, it was devastating, traumatizing, all of those things.
You two have come together with other families, other children, to try to get answers. Patricia, just explain for you, why is it so important to it's not going to bring you closure, is it? But to have something that you can kind of make sense of?
Yeah. I mean, this is very frank, but Esme's daddy, my daddy, and all of those passengers went to work one day and they came home 4 days later in a box. And that's the harsh reality of it, and we don't know why. We don't know. We don't know all the circumstances, the truth behind it. There hasn't been transparency, and you know, there's a lot of revelations now. People are coming forward, and we feel we need to know. We deserve to know.
And there have been investigations into what happened, and we've got a statement here from the MOD. They're saying it's unlikely that a public inquiry would identify any new evidence or reach any new conclusions, and the accident has already been the subject of 6 inquiries and investigations, including an independent judge-led review. So why have those answers not been forthcoming?
So yes, there have previously been 6 inquiries, but none of those have ever looked at the actual circumstances surrounding the crash. So what we are asking as a campaign group is, why was my father, Patricia's father, all those other passengers on board put on a flight that was deemed unairworthy? You may have seen at the last week, retired leader Squadron Burke has come forward and said that the flight was a political gesture, that this was a sort of a game between the Army and the RAF to prove that the Mark II Chinook was airworthy. So what we're asking for is, what are the circumstances of the crash? Who allowed that flight to take place? Because somebody somewhere knows what happened, and we would like accountability for that as the campaign group.
So you feel that recent revelations, allegations, make it even more important that this happens, and gives it a new reason for happening?
And it's important to say there was other aircraft available, and someone gave the order. The pilots, exemplary service pilots, so experienced, were ordered to fly that Chinook. They had grave concerns and they were ignored. And we want to know how someone could order pilots to fly an aircraft that, in the MOD's own words, was deemed positively dangerous and not to be relied on under any circumstances. That's their own terms.
And I think, just to add on to that, we had a rejection from Sir Keir Starmer as to another inquiry taking place, and we'd just, as a campaign group, like to call on him to review his promises with regard to the duty of candour, and to step up really and embrace the moral compass that I think our Prime Minister should have.
Duty of candour, we've talked about that on the programme before, regarding other inquiries and other court cases. This is where public servants have an absolute legal duty to give evidence and say what they knew.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, you know, as Prime Minister, the MOD, they're accountable to him, and he has a duty to question every decision they make. And they turned us down for a public inquiry, and we want to know why. Why is he hiding behind the MOD? And we deserve to know, and we feel he can overturn that. And it just stinks of another cover-up and, you know, another scandal.
What's it like not knowing, day to day, still having so many questions about what happened?
I think for myself and my family, we didn't even realise any of this until the documentary was aired in January of 2024. And, you know, we had people telephoning us and saying, oh, there's a documentary on about your husband, your dad. We didn't realise that there were these documents that had been sealed by the MOD for 100 years. And now that has, you know, been made public, we've come together as the campaign group. There's 24 out of 29 of the families involved. And, you know, we're not going to stop fighting for those answers.
You hopeful, Patricia?
Yeah.
You optimistic? Yeah.
I am. I really hope Keir Starmer's watching and he's listening and he's looking at us. It's a long, long time to wait. My mum has passed away. There's a couple of widows have passed away. They didn't get to know. And, you know, it's our human right to know all the circumstances surrounding our dad's death.
I would also add as well that we've got a change.org campaign /justice for the 29, and we've got nearly 40,000 signatures on there agreeing that this should be part of a judge-led public inquiry. So this isn't just about the 29 families, this is about 40,000 other people in the UK who are saying, yes, we agree, and this should be overturned, and there should be an inquiry into the circumstances of the crash.
We will keep an eye on what happens. But thank you both for coming in this morning.
Thank you very much.
To us. And the documentary that Esme was mentioning, Chinook Zulu Delta 576, it's available to watch on the BBC iPlayer right now.